The Australian Curriculum Studies Association would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and the waterways from where we are all meeting today. We pay our respects to the elders past and present, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We value the contributions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to education and their continued support of the teaching and learning of all Australians. We recognise that for thousands of years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been the first teachers, and that we are committed to continue our learning alongside them. Welcome everyone back to AXA Insights podcast series. And today, following our AGM, we are delighted to welcome some of our new board members, which is pretty exciting. And one of our new members is Jen. And Jen is a rural principal who's passionately involved in the big picture design of learning, which is something quite exciting in terms of the curriculum here. She's made a lifelong career of improving the learning and the life outcomes for rural students, especially those who probably need a little bit more support or additional support to access some of that curriculum. She's committed to creating equity for young people. Now, she has undertaken doctoral studies, and I know it's very nearly over the line with the University of New South Wales, and her research centres on how design can support rural and remote learning across Australia. So welcome, Jen.
Oh, thank you very much, Anna. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, we talk about, we're obviously all passionate, and especially I find I'm very lucky that the executive board and the executive committee are so passionate about education and come from such a range of fields within it. But everyone comes from a very starting point. We all went in for very different reasons, but all very similar reasons. So for you, what were your motivations for getting into it?
So I was a young person who had a number of different schools growing up. And my dad was in the bank. So every 2 years we moved. And so I firmed up my real passion for education in year 9 when I was a young person in Parret, which is right down the bottom of New South Wales. And I had a country experience program in the city, and I ended up in a school for special needs and disability, and I loved it. And that was it. And at 15, I thought, okay, that's great. So when I started studying and doing my pracs, I was so relieved that I actually loved it, because I had held on to this vision of myself for such a long time. And I've never, ever wavered. I love education. I love young people. I love teaching and learning. I love the opportunity to be part of people's lives. And I gravitated towards a rural space when I graduated. It wasn't what I wanted. I'm a public educator now, and so I've just kept moving further south and west and working with more diverse enrolments as my career has gone on. So the reason that I went into that was because I love what schools do for young people. And I think that learning is something that no one can take away from you once you have it. So I'm really privileged to be part of the learning journey of young people and impacting their lives. It's a fantastic opportunity, and I get paid to do that, which is really nice. Yeah.
And I think that makes a good point, because when you're in rural and remote communities, they have such a different need and different expectations of what the children are doing, where they're going. And I think we often don't give credit for the fact that within our roles as educators, we have to adapt and have that adaptability to go into new spaces and find where we belong as well, And I think having the kind of the confidence to say, this is where I believe I'm the right place for. This is the right place for me, and where I can make the biggest impact. And I think that's really something really important. But as you've gone through your journey, is there maybe one, or it might be a few things that you would see as probably one of your greatest accomplishments so far?
So I've got a number of things that I've done. I think that the thing that is really interesting to me is that I've not stopped and stood still at any time in my career. And I've always tried to find a way to learn. So I've gone and applied for a bunch of fellowships. One of them we know each other very well through. I will say that, Anna. So that's really important to me to continue to do that. I think that's one of the biggest achievements, not to sit still. Education is something that you're on the forefront of change. You're touching the future of lives that you're not even going to be around for in some way. So you've got to be able to do that and keep current. So I think that's one of my biggest achievements. My proudest work is as a principal of a complex and diverse school. When I moved here to James Fallon High School, I came home. I felt like I'd come home. I love this school. I love its everything it stands for. And I have, carved out some really interesting curriculum spaces. I'm really passionate about the work that I do in big picture, but I love the fact that I've been able to to do those things that are creative and innovative within policy, so there is always an opportunity to do that. So I think that's probably what I would say, Anna, that I don't sit still. I hothouse lots of learning. I'm constantly thinking about what I can learn. I'm a total nerd.
No, but I think, isn't that a wonderful thing that you're modeling what a lifelong learner is to our students? You sit there and you go, I'm not stopping. Come on, I've got more to learn. I want to know more about that. And I think that's a hard thing as an educator, because we kind of sometimes feel that we should have all that information to pass on, and we hold the key. And it is a big mind shift, and we can say, oh, well, we can do all these things, but actually there's still a massive part of us have that imposter, like, I need to know, I need to be ahead of the game. And to have that vulnerability and say, I'm still learning. I'm doing it because actually I'm passionate about learning, not because I have to go to a PD or have to do that, or I'm taking on a new initiative. I'm passionate about what I'm doing, but also, really good point you made, within policy, understanding the landscape and understanding that there are just some limitations, and that, how do you be innovative in that space? And that's a really good one. But we talk about the accomplishment, talk about great things, but there is always the other side of it where we have to say, on reflection, there may be something that we went, oh, it was good at the time, or I thought it was great, but actually when I look back, could I have done it better? Or if I was to do it again, what would I take forward into that?
So I think that there were some times where in a border community, navigating the COVID disruption was something that took me by surprise. And in 2022, after 2021 and the fabulous acknowledgements I had in my career, I thought COVID was over. And on the Victoria-New South Wales border, that was just like a whole new stratosphere of stupid. And so we thought it was over, but it so wasn't. And so that year I went through a space where I went, I'm a terrible leader. I'm not a really good leader at all. I wasn't, I wasn't comfortable with the way things were progressing. The whole community was reeling from the COVID disruptions of living in a border town with a shared community health. Very weird time. I think that was a really hard time, and there were lots and lots of people who were deeply unhappy, and I did not know how to fix that, and I was a fixer. So I have since stepped back and taken care of things as well. I'm very fortunate that I have had a lot of mentors who have really supported me over the years, and I met one particular one who said, you are probably a reasonable principal, you might even be a good one, but you've just got a few more challenges to deal with. They're just different. And it stopped me from being completely immersed and devastated to feeling more observational about the work. And I think that was a really different and interesting and hard time. and so I think that was a time that I could draw a line under and move on. I've made heaps of mistakes. I think the best quality a leader can have is humility. You've got to be able to go, oh well, that didn't work, and what can I learn about that, and how can I improve that? Because if you think you've got all the answers, then you are, you're not a leader that helps guide when things are changing. But it was a really weird time after COVID on the New South Wales Victorian border, to be fair.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying there is quite interesting, because during that period of time, we all had such different experience of it. And I know within Australia, it was a huge difference. I was up in the Pilbara, and we had very little. The mining industry shut us down, and life went on as normal. We had none of it. Everything was still there. We had a healthcare system. We still went out in our boats. We still went to the shops. There was none of that. And then I looked at peers in the UK who suddenly had an even bigger problem because they had children in high-rise flats who couldn't access technology. And then even within our own country, as you're saying, in your environment was so different because we had different restrictions and different borders. So I don't know. I think anyone could really have foreseen that or gone through that. And I don't think anyone, fingers crossed, no, we don't have to do that again. But the experiences that we've learned from that was quite interesting. And it'll be very interesting to see. I think we're still suffering from a lot of the COVID issues. I know that especially in the younger years, people are saying that's a lot happening in the early years space, children not being school ready. But it's interesting I wonder what the positives that came out of it. How did we move into a digital learning space? Is there any positives we can take from it? Have we learned from it? And I suppose that's where you're talking about those sort of things.
Well, during COVID, we had all these little online principal collegial network meetings. We called ourselves a little COVID club, and we were dreaming big because we thought this is the disruption that might make us really genuinely think about engagement and belonging for young people. And we had all of these massive plans about what we're going to do to shake up the system. And it didn't quite work that way, unfortunately, but I still think the silver lining is that we worked out lots of things could happen, and learning happens everywhere. It doesn't have to be in a set location at a set time. And we are still working to get some of our vulnerable community back. And I think that's really hard. So we might need to really deeply think about how to engage learners when they have already poor experiences with school and have become completely disassociated with it. I think that's a really interesting prospect. So we do need to think about things differently, and we're going to have to. But, we didn't know what we didn't know, honestly, at the time. And so I guess that's where that was. It's an interesting space. I don't know, but I think that the next year's year 11 is the group that we sort of started without any orientation or transition to high school. So, and it seems such a long time ago now.
It does. It does. And I know my son was that year going through, and he's going through that. And I look back and I feel quite sorry for his experience, because I look at it and I think you were just thrown in. Here we go, here's high school, off you go. But, I think what we don't give children some as a credit for is how resilient they are as well, and how adaptable they were, and how their experience will probably shape what their educational journey looked like. So, yeah, definitely. But obviously we're talking really, because we are the Australian Curriculum Studies Association, we need to talk about curriculum. So what does curriculum mean to you?
Well, we've been doing a bit of discussion about that in the workplace, and curriculum is actually from the Latin word curricul, which is chariot, which means the vehicle by which learning happens. And so that's how I see curriculum. It is the vehicle by which learning experiences take place. And I've been very lucky to be involved in a range of different experiences around curriculum. I was involved in co-writing a syllabus back in the day, and then thinking about being, a curriculum, I suppose, specialist for a little while as a deputy principal, and then leading curriculum and curriculum leaders in New South Wales is an interesting experience, because the curriculum is very detailed, it's very prescriptive, And there is usually an examination at the very end of it, and there's some assessment spaces, and there's a great deal of structure around that and rigor. And so, that's where that is. So I do see the vehicle can be different now, and that's where that is. But I know that as educators, it's really hard to think about emerging designs when you're in the work and you have to get ahead of what you're doing all the time. So, I do think that that's where that is. And I've explored different vehicles too, different vehicles. So Big Picture is a totally different vehicle with a personalised curriculum and a personalised assessment, which is has no metric, no mark, no.
And that's interesting because we just where you're talking there, it's sort of this is where curriculum and pedagogy sort of need to merge, isn't it? Because some students will not be able to access curriculum in the way another will, and that's sort of by nature, by personality. But I'd love you to explain a little bit more about Big Picture, because I know you're heavily involved and I've seen little bits in action, especially in remote schools. But give us really a little bit more about Big Picture, because there'll be lots of people out there wanting to know more.
Sure. So Big Picture Australia started in 2006, and the National Schools Network, James Ladwig and Viv White, were given the opportunity to go and have a look at all these designs and see what they thought would work in Australia. And they went to the Met School in Providence in Rhode Island and looked at the structure and the model there. So it's a personalised learning design.
Yeah.
Young people have an individualised learning plan that they co-construct with their advisor. They don't have a teacher, they have an advisor. Believe it or not, teachers don't know everything, which is really lovely. And that they co-construct it with their families and the advisors and any mentors they have in the community. There are some must-dos. So it usually centres around a personal interest project, which is around their passions and interests, which, to be fair, as an adult, you do the things you like. If you don't like them, it's like, hitting yourself over the head with a very big stick for as long as you're in it. Yet we tell kids to sit in a classroom and learn cells, So, and then they work through that work independently. There are some must-dos. They're in an advisory, and an advisory is a small community of learners, around 17 students, and the advisor is a facilitator of learning. It is not, they don't say, now class, today we're going to do this, right? It's not. And so they are very autonomous learners, and they're working deeply on their interest, and their assessment is an exhibition. So they exhibit their learning to a panel of their chosen people. And it's really cool. As a parent, usually when you come into the school, it's for a problem. Or an assembly where you have to sit still. And you are actively engaged in the milestoning of your child's learning. And so today I was in a graduate exhibition around migrant law, and how she came to that journey. And she's passionate about food and ceramics.
Yes.
And it was beautiful, like absolutely beautiful. But that was her passion. And then the second graduate exhibition we went to today was around design and art and digital art, and we looked at the contrast of her Year 8 exhibition, and it was on dreams. So there's been so many different passions and interests explored. And I think that's really cool for a young person to say, we hear you. And this is, if you like this, let's pursue this. You can learn so much in terms of empirical reasoning, in terms of your research, in terms of, numeracy and literacy skills. And it's mapped against the Australian curriculum. So it's not, it just takes away the dot points of a prescriptive syllabus, and it allows kids the freedom to explore. They do whole of advisory activities. They check in the mornings. They do one-on-one conferencing with their facilitator. They outlearn. So they have a mentor in the community. So that's a really big part of Big Picture, so that, you have people that are in your corner. So for these mentees and the mentors, they had lots of people that they linked with their post-school destinations, and or had conversations with people that share their passions. So that's very much part of it. So the young person finds that they open their eyes and learn everywhere.
Yes.
And that's really, really fabulous. And they learn to be self-directed, autonomous learners. I go into our advisory space here at James Fallon, and no one stands to attention. No one goes, there's the principal.
Yes.
What's happened? They're deeply immersed in the work. And what I have also found is the advisors are very, very happy in the work too. Like they love it. It takes a mind shift. You have to let the kids learn. But honestly, it's a design that works. So it's got a personalized design with a personalized assessment. And it's authentic, and it's real world, and it's applied learning with engagement as the center, passion and interest at the center. And, if you want to look at the traditional metrics, the kids are literate. They're self-actualizing. They, if you want to measure them by a NAPLAN result, most of those young people they improve incredibly in the NAPLAN data. If they do an HSC subject in New South Wales, like they can choose to, they're often really, really well versed in it because they know how to do the work on their own because they've like it and they do it.
And they've learned how to learn their way.
Element 1 of the teaching standards is know your students and how they learn. By the time they finish big picture, they know themselves and how they learn. It's actually a superpower, and that supersedes the standards, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think we've got ourselves in a position with a lot of education settings where we hold the parents outside the gates, outside the door, and we don't allow them in because the fear of being judged or the fear of something happening. And I think we've actually lost that communicative element. And I remember when I was used to lead with a lot of people, I say, that you've been handed the most important thing in that person's life. So for you not to involve them in that process, it's really, really not doing them a service. And I think, now going through the process of my own children, I struggle to understand, and I'm in the profession, kind of a pathway of what's going on. And I want to be involved. I want to find out more. I want to make sure that when the child comes home, I can support them. I might not know whatever subject it is they're doing, but I'm willing to help them because I understand where their journey is. So, I think that's a really important part. And you also touched on the fact that I think we forget that so many parents come to the gates with their own traumatic experience of education. And yet we still say to them, give us your kids. This is what you have to do. We know that you've had issues at school, but this is what happens. And I think bridging that gap is so important for long term.
It is. And when they are a big picture student, the culture is to engage. It's not to misbehave. You don't have, like, if they don't do the work, it's on them.
Yes.
They soon work out that that's not where they want to be. And so it's not punitive ever. And so it's a situation where you're not fighting with a young person. It's a really lovely opportunity for for learning to happen. And so I think it's a design that works. It really does. And it works for every learner. It's not it has a social justice lens. So in the big picture design here at James Fallon, there are very, very few behaviour issues or any of those things. That's a real win. But it's just it's a social justice work. You do work with young people that have learning differences. It's great for those kids, and it's great for kids that don't feel heard, and it's great for high potential kids because they can flourish with their interests. But it's for every kid, really. So you can't stereotype who goes in there. So my view is for rural kids, because the area of the Pilbara is different to the area of Karratha, which is different to the area of Exmouth, which is like, so, in Western Australia, no rural space is the same. So work within your rural space and in your context. I think that it would be, that would be great.
Yeah.
Because
and that context
you can't
is
stereotype.
huge. Yeah, you've got the farming families who in all that space, and you've got the mining families, and then you have other ones who are in a different, kind of, as you're saying, right on the water, and their lives are fishing and the thing. So it is something that, is led by community, but also I think it also helps people stay in their communities. They want to be there.
It builds
and they
the
want
talent in the towns. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's important. Now, we've talked briefly about some of the things, and I know I think there's been a lot of conversation in the last few weeks, especially in educational spaces with the ministers and what's going on. But from on the ground in a school, what are some of the biggest challenges you think are facing the profession?
I've been involved for a long time in the profession, and I believe that we are the only people who can elevate the profession. And I think that it requires that opportunity for elevation.
Yes.
It's the challenge that we face with education. This is my theory, so please, this is just what I think. Once upon a time, when I was late from home, the neighbour would squirt my backside with a hose and say, "Get home." Right? And if we had head lice, my mum would lean over the fence and say, "What do you do with head lice?" Right? Yes. The neighbourhood would help with that space. The community helped with raising the child. You don't have a manual for child raising. So the community and the extended families and all of those things helped with that space. But invariably, with urbanisation and maybe a little bit of disconnect with that neighbourhood feel and sense of community, families are on their own, and so they lean on the school to as one institution. And when they feel out of their depth, they feel they've got to abrogate their responsibility to somebody else. Mobile phones in schools. That makes me laugh. Like if you really think about it, we've got the young people for 202 days, 6 hours a day. So banning mobile phones at school, is that going to solve the mobile phone issue? No, it's not. It's a whole of community response. So I think that's a really interesting space. And, in my research, I've worked out that we're not a very equitable system here in Australia, because we have highest concentrations of disadvantage in disadvantaged schools. Yes. And so instead of catastrophizing those disadvantaged environments, we've got to find a way to, keep ourselves, socially just. I went to school with every type of learner back in the day. I didn't have a typecast, but I do worry that that's not a nice brand for Australia. A progressive society that has these high pockets of disadvantage. And if we are looking at a disadvantage, a young, rural, remote, Aboriginal young person is seriously disadvantaged.
Yes.
Okay. So how do we shift that? So that bothers me.
Yes.
Because it will become a real divide. And we all live in this, we all live in the same country, in the same community, and we need to be able to combine together. If we have haves and have-nots, that'll be really, really bad for the future for young people. Yeah.
And what I was thinking when you were talking about both of those things, with especially the mobile phones, and it's kind of my own experience. I started off in a very beautiful school in Oxford, England, and outside the children, it was Oxford University. So that could be a progressive pathway. Maybe parents had gone there, and it was literally you walked out the gates, you walked 100 yards, and then you were straight into the university. So that was something that they could actually physically see was obtainable. And then we go to rural and remote communities where maybe the nearest building might be a correctional facility, or it might just be the local server. Like, there's a complete difference, and we forget that we need that visibility, and things like mobile phones often give children that chance, or give them a kind of a glimpse into what different worlds are like, without, saying that is the cause of what's happening. Sometimes it's just their gateway to something different, and I think that's really important. So yeah, but you talk a little bit there about, kind of those remote communities and sort of parents really coming to the schools for that guidance. And I guess for a lot of regional schools, we will often send our young graduates out there, or early stage career teachers. And I know that when I was 22, I certainly didn't know about head lice. I would have no idea how to check a child for head lice. I would have had no idea what to do. All those things that as a 22-year-old, I'd never thought about. I wouldn't have known. Even at kindy, I wouldn't know how to change a child, or who to find out if they've wet themselves, all those sorts of things. And it's a really big responsibility. So what do you think you would give a graduate coming into perhaps a rural and remote community? What would be the best advice?
Be open to the community and the strengths it can offer you. There are a number of people who are built for country education. And they're built because they're pragmatic. They've got the opportunity to take the community in and respect the community for what it is. You can't be a crusader in a rural community. You can't think, I'm going to bring my cultural wisdom to you and make you a better person, because that actually, it actually is really biased. You can't have a set of expectations, and you certainly can't stereotype a community. But do be prepared for the fact that you will be known, and you will be valued, and you will be cared for, but you will be exposed. Rural people have great pragmatism and great resilience, and they have a way of being really honest and upfront, in my opinion. And certainly they will know you. They will want to know you. But that's not always something that urban people are prepared for. But I find more and more that rural young people end up back in rural communities. They want to go and give back, and they love the lifestyle. There's so many strengths to living in a community where there's lots of space and an opportunity to to have quiet times. And I don't know how people commute in a city, because it's just dead time. Unless you're listening to a podcast or something like that, it's dead time. So we have a traffic report in Albury, and it's hilarious, because and people, and I live out of town, and people go, "Oh, that's so far." And I think in Melbourne, that would be like 2 suburbs. What are you talking about? So it's just a way of thinking about space and time in a really different way. So just be open to it. If you're closed, then you're not going to experience the opportunities that a rural community will give you. And a rural school.
100%. And the person who owns the local shop will be a parent of a child in your class. The person who's the lifeguard at the local pool will see you getting up every day in your bathers and going swimming, and you're just going to know that's going to be part of what it is. And interestingly, I remember thinking when I first came here, I worked in worked as a matron in a boarding house, waiting for my teaching registration to come through, and I could not in my head believe the size that some of these children lived on stations. And the fact that they were 2 hours away on their driveway even to get somewhere. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, how could you be that alone? It's just say the 4 or 5 of you in a house. But I would say, I think 99% of all of those children, their dream was to go back. They would finish whatever they were doing, and 100% they were going back. And I remember thinking what testament that is to how children, how important their childhood is to them, and how it shapes them as human beings. So a little one sort of on the way, and I'm sure you probably know, and it's a bit of a tricky one sometimes, because it's probably quite a niche of where we sit as an educator and what little group we're in. But is there maybe a group of educators or a person in particular that you're thinking, oh, they're on the watch list, I can see they're making waves to change what the future is going to look like?
Look, that is a difficult question, because I also think that there are some really outstanding quiet achievers
Yes.
that don't always shout from the rooftops to be noticed. There are some incredible leaders and educators I admire enormously, but I really like what's happening in some of the national professional spaces.
Yes.
That they're bringing in research platforms and thinking about, why would we look at, like, why not look at the research evidence? It's there. Like, why not delve into that? Somebody's done the work for you. It's a good idea to have a look at that. And I like the fact that there are some researchers who are really, long gone of the days of being in your office all the time and just teaching and then writing. There's people who reach out and they're genuinely interested in linking with the practical space. So, I'm reticent to actually mention specific names because I don't think that's fair. Because then I would miss somebody that I would like to mention. But I'm really privileged in when I'm doing my doctorate, I read all this literature and think, wow, there's so many really clever people. But those people are also sometimes practicing professionals. So, I like that. I think, I like some of the curriculum structures in and around the States. I'm really enjoying exploring that as I look into the national agenda. And I see pockets of innovation everywhere, but I also see state systems that are really genuinely paying attention to assessment in a different way, which, and curriculum in a different way as well. So I think that's really nice. And I think that we're a beautiful country that needs to bring up our own stuff. I kind of think we often look to other countries for our answers. I call it the AstroTurf argument, where the US was putting down hockey pitches, and it was going to be the bee's knees and everything was great. And then they started getting knee injuries and grazes. And so as they were tearing it up, we in Australia were putting it down. So it's kind of don't, we've got some great talent here. Let's use it. Yeah.
Could not agree more. And I think my frustration of going to so many schools and they adopt programs that aren't contextual to environment, but because someone's put a funding grant in. You probably see much more in the rural and remote areas where it's like, oh, we need a school. This is a great program. We'll give you money to do it. And it's completely irrelevant to the context. And I think that's a really hard one. And even the words used, data informed, evidence based, a lot of people don't have the luxury of actually looking at that. And when they do look into it at a deeper level, it's really not that valid to this kind of what the outcomes are. So when you were talking about the big picture, I just loved the fact that you said it was designed for Australia. That's not to say it wasn't, as you're saying, they went across to different countries and absorbed some of what was going on, but it was designed with our country in mind. So I think that was really good.
Well, I think that the big picture Australia is there's big picture learning in the US and there's in Kenya and a couple of other, in lots of different other countries, but it's nuanced here in Australia. So we have an academy structure. So it's a school within a school. And that means that it's great for the school as well as the academy. To learn differently and to think about that. So I think that's a unique feature of Australian big picture. But I think that there's lots of people we could look at to move and shake. I think it was a privilege to be part of the Commonwealth Teaching Fellowship, to link in with other fellows in this ongoing way. That's been a fabulous privilege, I think, Anna. It's been great.
Definitely. Yeah, it has, and just and not even within our own cohort, that alumni group that become part of something together and find commonality between one another. I think that's been great. And also to lean on one another. I think that's what we don't do enough in our profession, as you're talking about before. It's we are the ones who have to lift ourselves up. We can change a system if we can do it. And so leaning into those around us. And I think those who, as you're saying, like that, even that different state thing, being outside of our bubble as well, I think we can get quite caught up in maybe what's the system at itself and what, even in our workplace. But to be able to have a dialogue and a conversation with someone outside of that is really rewarding. But we're getting to the last question, and it's always probably the most important question. Have you had a favorite teacher, or I was going to say, I'm going to expand it because someone told me this, a favorite colleague or some sort of situation or team that has really shaped who you are and where you are today?
So I had so many teachers growing up because I was a bank child, I suppose. I had lots of teachers who really saw me, and I really liked that. But I think if I was to choose somebody, it would be a colleague. And this colleague, I was in the independent sector for a few years because that was the only job I could get outside of the CBD of Sydney. And then I met my husband, and he moved to Wagga, and I followed this teacher. She was doing she was having a long service leave block because her David was going to big school. And I went from this school that was run by a private company to a really low socioeconomic, large school. And I followed this exceptional teacher. And I learned so much about what it was to be a really good teacher. And I followed this colleague. And the first thing she did while she was on long service leave was invite us to meet all of her friends and have morning tea. Now, our careers have intersected all the way through our lives. So, when she was a head teacher, I knew she was a head teacher. And then when she was a deputy principal, I was part of that network. I started, working as a deputy principal in the Riverina with her. And then we became deputy principals here at James Fallon together. So that was so good. We were the first female deputy principals in the school ever. And it was a fantastic opportunity. She then went on to become principal. So she was my boss, as well as my mentor, as well as my friend, as well as my colleague. And she is such a warm and inclusive spirit, and, and taught me to really look after myself, but also what really mattered. So I think that, there's lots of people I could say are very much part of my learning journey, but I guess I've known her since her son was 4, and I think now he's 40. So,
oh my word!
That's
quite the journey. And how lovely that not only did you learn in a professional sense, but you learned in a personal, and someone was looking out for your well-being, and you had their backs at the same time. And that check-in with somebody to give you sometimes the hard conversation when you need it, and to pull you up and say, this is burnout, this is what's happening. And I think more so in a leadership role, it's so important because you can be very isolated. And how beautiful that you went on that journey with her. So now, Jen, it has been so lovely to chat to you today. And I'm very lucky because I will continue to be working with you lots, but I really do hope that our members and anyone who is listening to this podcast can see just how fabulous you are and the work you're doing and how instrumental it is to changing some of the landscape for Australia. So thank you very much, Jen, and we look forward to talking again soon.
Thanks, Anna. It will be fun. I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Wonderful.